Hello and welcome back to my second weekly devlog. That didn't really hold up very well. After I uploaded my last video, I also published an early version of my game on itch.io, and I asked you guys to point out bugs and things that you think I should fix. And the first one that people pointed out to me was that whenever you go into slow motion, the vignette effect around the screen would start flickering, and I had to get rid of that real quick because epilepsy. And there was also a problem whenever you switched to the rocket launcher after firing it at least once, that the muzzle flash animation would play, and that was not supposed to happen, so I also got that taken care of. And there was also an issue with the breakable walls where if you would jump against it and hold forward, basically you would be stuck against it, and that's not good. So I gave it a new physics material with less friction, and it seemed to work fine. The only problem left after that is that if the player jumps off of the platform, they basically just fall into the abyss forever, and there's not really anything to save them. So I added a giant floor underneath everything, and also some walls for the player to jump up with the rocket launcher in case they get stuck down there. So now that I had the bugs out of the way, I started working on a damage system. And the first thing I did was make it so that the vignette effect around the screen gets slightly more intense each time you hit a certain kind of object. And I didn't really like that it jumped from one intensity to the next, so instead I made it work smoothly. And I also wanted to make it slightly more red each time the player gets hit. So I made a new color and made it so that the red value of that color would become slightly more intense the more of the player's HP was used up. And eventually I got damage working pretty well, so that whenever the player hits a certain type of damaging object, the vignette effect becomes slightly more intense until it reaches its breaking point and the player just resets and goes back to the beginning. And this worked fine, but I needed some kind of recovery system, so I made it so that when the player's HP was below their maximum HP, it would start slowly moving back to that maximum, and the vignette effect would slowly go away as a result. So now that I had a proper damage system, I needed to make Cletus attack the player, because right now he's just kind of this little guy that runs around for you to terrorize, and now that I think about it, that's not really fair, so, you know, it's about time. I started by giving him an attack animation, and it looked a little goofy because he doesn't actually have anything in his hand, and so I went into Blender and I modeled a knife for him to hold. And when I brought the knife into Unity, I changed the blade to a glowing red color, but that made it a little bit confusing because he's the enemy and the player is the protagonist. So for the player to have a weapon that is using the same colors as Cletus doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, so instead I changed the rocket launcher to a glowing yellow color, and that made it a little bit less confusing who was on whose side. So boom, Cletus can attack the player, but there's not really any way for the player to select a difficulty, and I was gonna do this with just flat buttons at the start, but I thought it would be a little bit more interactive if the player could go up and shoot something that was displaying the difficulty that they wanted. So I made a difficulty selection room, which is basically just a long hallway where at the end of it there's 3 floating monitors, and each one displays a difficulty, and if you shoot one, the others fall and you're allowed to leave the room. So basically you can't start the game until you've actually selected a difficulty. And at first I had it so that this block would disappear and allow the player to leave, but that was kind of boring to me, so I instead went to Blender and started designing a futuristic door design to use instead. And so I brought that into Unity and gave it an animation to open when the player shoots a monitor, and then that worked, and it looked a lot more polished too. So I thought while I was busy adding polish to my game, I would also add a particle effect for when the player hits the ground. And after I got that working, I also decided to make a shoot animation for the rocket launcher, and my game was looking a lot more polished. But I didn't really feel like I was done because the monitors I was using didn't really have a whole lot of personality, and I thought they could be a little bit cooler. So I went into Blender and started designing an arcade machine that would also have a fractured version for when you shoot it and it would fall to pieces. So I brought that into Unity and I used that to replace the monitors that were there before. And just to make it a little bit clearer, I added an outline around whichever one the player was aiming at so that it's just a little bit clearer which one they're going to select, and it also looks nicer. The only problem with this is that the arcade machines were rotating at the same speed that the original monitors were, and this made the hitboxes of these arcade machines collide in places they weren't really supposed to, which made it a whole lot harder to select a difficulty, and I wanted it to be easier, so I tried fudging around with the rotation. Oh gosh. Oh, there we go, much better. As a final touch, I thought I would give these arcade machines a little bit more personality, and I thought that it would be funny if they each had a really innocent looking face, but when you go up to talk to one of them, it would have a menacingly deep voice. And normally I would have used one of CapCut's AI voices to do this, but luckily I have a special talent for that sort of thing.
Pick easy mode, you will not die. Pick medium, It is the best value.
So after I had all of my voice clips, I painstakingly animated each syllable of each voice clip, and that took forever, but the end result was worth it, and all I needed to do now was to bring these video clips into Unity and then put them on the screens of the monitors, and it was kinda hard to get them to say the right thing at the right time.
Do not listen to the others. Please fucking treat me.
And yeah, now these guys can talk to you and spiral you into a moral dilemma over which one you're supposed to shoot and end its misery because you can only pick one. And the game is pretty much done for now. But before I wrap this up and package it for itch.io, I wanted to make sure that all of the bugs were gone. I did end up finding a couple of different bugs. The first one was that if you switched weapons during the shoot animation of the one you're holding, basically you can't fire that weapon anymore, and sometimes the game would just straight up crash, which was not good, but I ended up fixing that. And I also found a bug where in pro gamer difficulty, basically you would recover extremely fast, but since I found it and I'm the developer, that's not a bug, that's a feature. And for now the game is pretty much done, so if you want to download it, there's a link down below for the itch.io page, and also if you have any suggestions about it or things that you think I should fix or add, then please tell me in the comments of this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers!